Today we are looking at the United Kingdom, and when we speak about the United Kingdom we are not talking about England, Wales and Scotland, but we are talking about the United Kingdom in Israel in the time of three kings: King Saul, King David and King Solomon. We know they ruled over the kingdoms. And I say it in plural because when Saul started, and even when David started, there were still different kingdoms, and they came together under David as one king, as one kingdom. And Solomon took the kingdom over from King David, and he had a united kingdom. But after Solomon, when he died, the kingdom, the United Kingdom, also died. After the miraculous deliverance from Egypt, for a period of 40 years in the desert, in the wilderness, and after the conquest of the land, the promised land, you have to understand, the land was promised to them by God, that there was a period of the judges we talked about. Many specific minor prophecies were given and fulfilled during this time, as recorded in the biblical books of Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua and Judges. But eventually, strangely enough, you can almost say, is that the people of God, the people of God were not acting as the people of God. So they were doing things that were not right. And God said, well, I will give you what you asked me, because they were asking a king to rule over them. And because of the bad religious situation they had for hundreds of years with the judges and with the ongoing problems, religiously spoken, spiritually spoken, God said, okay, I'm going to give you what you want. You want a king like the other kingdoms have a king? I will give you one. But you will not be happy. And yeah, that is what happened. And God, he gave a whole list of things that he said, you will not be happy. You will actually see those things happening in your own lifetime. And that king that you were chosen, that is the one who is going to make it through for you. But it's not good. But they didn't want to listen. They just wanted to be like the world was, the world is today, and we can still learn from the same mistakes the people did in that place at that time. Of course, we are talking about something that happened more than 3,000 years ago. But you see, the human mind and the human kind is still the same. It is the natural demand of humans to each other. That's what you call peer pressure. That is demanding things as the world has. And you can see that in the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, in the time of Saul, David, and Solomon, and later on it did not really work out very well. But we will look at it. So the people wanted to have a king, and God said, okay, I'm going to give you a king. And so there was a whole story. The whole story evolves around that one person. And that one person is the person of Saul. Israel asks for a kingdom, for a king. You can read that in 1 Samuel 8. First Samuel 8. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his son as Israel's leaders. The name of his firstborn, and so on and so on and so on. So you can read it. And then in verse 4, so the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said, you are old, and your sons do not follow your way. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as the other nations have. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. And they have done from the day I brought you up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights. And then it goes on. Samuel told the words and so on. And then finally, there's a man coming up. There was a Benjaminite, so from the tribe of Benjamin, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorat, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. Kish had a son named Saul, a handsome young man, as could be found anywhere in Israel. He was a head taller than anyone else. And then we get a story. It's quite strange because it talks about donkeys. Seemingly, Kish had donkeys, and Saul had to do something with the donkeys. The donkeys were disappeared, or had disappeared, and so Kish sent his son Saul with one of his servants to go and to find the donkeys and to bring them back. And then the whole thing evolves around it. They are looking here, looking there, they're looking, you can almost say they're looking everywhere. They do not find the donkeys. But then you have the story of the servant helping financially, and the servant says, I would, we need to go to a local seer. That's the word that's being used instead of prophet. By the way, when you look at 1 Samuel 9 verse 9, there's the explanation. But the explanation is between brackets, so you know that means that it's a thing that's being put there to explain. It's not the Bible, but it gives you an explanation. And so the seer, Samuel, is in that village. They are going to. Saul is kind of anxious. He said, my father will be more anxious about the fact that I'm not back, more anxious than losing his donkeys. And actually, that is what Samuel is saying to them. Samuel has been given by God the command to anoint Saul as king. Of course, at that moment, Saul doesn't know that. The servant doesn't know that. Only Samuel knows it. But he has the person of Saul has not yet materialized in front of him. And so the whole story evolves around this search for the donkeys and eventually the search for the seer, the prophet. And then they come together, and Samuel already knew that Saul is coming. And he had prepared certain materials, for example, food. And he explains everything to Saul. And Saul is kind of, hesitant to what is this? Why is this happening to me? Why am I chosen? Something like that. And then you have the whole situation of Samuel and Saul. They are together, they eat together, they are on top of the mountain, then they go back down to the city, and there things are happening. Saul has messages from the Lord God himself, and he is bringing those messages over to, first of course, to Saul himself, and then later on to the other people around. But then Saul has to become the king. And since this is the first time that the people will have a king in this particular way, so Samuel has to do a certain thing that makes a person, a chosen person by God, and he has to do certain rituals, and then that person becomes the king. And when almost the time has come that Saul and Samuel are saying goodbye to each other, and let's read it in chapter 10 of 1 Samuel. As Saul turned to leave Samuel, God changed Saul's heart. God changed Saul's heart. Now he is a changed person. And all these signs were fulfilled that day. The ones that was said before that they are going to look at, and Samuel explained that, and so that is what is happening. Verse 10, when he and his servant arrived at Gibeah, a procession of prophets met him. The Spirit of God came powerfully upon him, and he joined in their prophesying. So Saul now becomes a prophet. When all those who had formerly known him saw him, so seemingly is in the area where his family is, and saw him prophesying with the prophets, they asked each other, "What is this? What is happening to the son of Kish? Is Saul among the prophets?" A man who lived there answered, "And who is their father?" So it became a saying, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" After Saul stopped prophesying, he went to a high place. Now Saul's uncle asked him and his servant, "Where have you been?" Saul said, "Well, we were looking for donkeys, but when we saw they were not to be found, we went to Samuel." Saul's uncle said, "Tell me what Samuel said to you." Saul replied, "He assured us that the donkeys had been found." But he did not tell his uncle what Samuel had said about the kingship. So Samuel summoned the people of Israel at Mizpah, verse 18, and he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought Israel out of Egypt and delivered you from the power of Egypt and all the kingdoms of that oppressed you. But you have now rejected your God, who saves you out of all of the disasters and calamities. And you have said, 'No, appoint a king over us.' So now present yourself before the Lord by your tribes and clans." So when Samuel had met Israel come forward by tribes, the tribe of Benjamin was taken by lot. Then he brought forward the tribe of Benjamin clan by clan, and Matri was taken. Finally, Saul, son of Kish, was taken. But when they looked for him, they couldn't find him. That's Saul. The moment he was supposed to be anointed as king, he was hiding. Was he afraid? I think so, because he didn't know what it meant. Neither did the people of Israel knew or know what it means to have a king. So this is a totally new situation, and everyone is afraid, probably except Samuel. But Saul was hidden, so they ran and brought him out. As he stood among the people, he was a head taller than all the others. Samuel said to the people, "Do you see the man the Lord has chosen? There is no one like him among all the people." Then the people shouted, "Long live the king." And I think that is an important message those people are saying. Not only we want to have a king, but we want him to be long over us. So he has a blank sheet to do whatever he wanted. Strangely enough, he does not build himself a palace. He doesn't arrange a court. No, he goes back to his old doings. I personally do not really understand what that really means, except that I can see this is what's happening. So I don't know whether that man Saul was really the king the people wanted. Maybe God was teasing them, and he's teasing them for 40 more years. But in chapter 11, we see again Saul being, you can almost say, reconfirmed as the king. This is important in the sense that like I said, this is totally new. This is absolutely new to them, and so they have a problem. And then we have Samuel who says goodbye to Israel, and so on. And then we have, well, Samuel is not leaving because Samuel is still in the background all the time. I mean, the book is called Samuel, but also he himself is all the time in the background. And what do we have? In 11 verse 4, it is renewed. And then in chapter 13, Saul is doing things not according to what God wanted him to do. Let's read 1 Samuel 13 verse 13. Samuel is talking. You have done foolish things. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler over this people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. You know, in a worldly situation we all live in this world, people have all kinds of reasons to become what they want to become, and to oppress and suppress and discriminate other people because they think that is something they have to do. But the reality is, of course, different. So now we are at the idea of you have done a foolish thing. You can almost say Saul in his innocence was doing things, yeah, well, he didn't know better, so he's doing things. But he has to follow the guidelines God gave him through the prophet. And so it is absolutely necessary for King Saul to be guided. He is the king. Remember, he is the king for 40 years. And of course, he doesn't know that. I mean, beforehand, you don't know how long you will live. So neither did Saul knew how long he would live and how long he would be the king. And in his mind, if he sets things in motion in the sense, okay, I need to have a successor. And that comes up. Already in chapter 13, we see someone popping up. And that man is Jonathan. Jonathan, okay, Saul and his son Jonathan and the man with them were staying at Gibeah in Benjamin, while the Philistines camped in Michmash. Raiding parties were sent out from the Philistine camp in 3 detachments. One turned toward Ophrah in the vicinity of Shual, another toward Beth Horon, and the third toward the borderland overlooking the valley of Zebaim, facing the wilderness. We are not going into what is happening here. Is that Saul has a son, and that son is seemingly ready to take over from his father. He may be too young to do that, but that's not the issue. The issue is that there is someone, and that someone is going to play a vital role. Because what we have, Jonathan attacks the Philistines, and then you have a whole series of stories about Jonathan. But then in chapter 15, we only started in chapter 10, but chapter 15, Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them and as they came from Egypt. Now go attack the Amalekites and destroy them totally. All that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, children, infants, cattle, sheep, camels, donkeys. So Paul summoned the men and mustered them in Teliam. 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 from Judah. Saul went to the city of Amalek, and it goes on. He set an ambush, and then Saul attacked the Amalekites, and then we see again in verse 10, and then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. I regret that I made Saul king. Listen, this is what we call the anthropomorphism. God regrets. It doesn't mean that he changes his mind. No, because he knew beforehand that Saul was going to do certain things. And he set his mind to certain other things. So it was a conflict of interest, and that's what we have here. Early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul, but he was told Saul had gone to Carmel. There he has set up a monument in his own honor and turned and gone on down to Gilgal. When Samuel reached him, Saul said, the Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions. Yeah. Some people think they do that, but Saul has a problem. Saul has an ongoing problem, and we will see that as soon as David comes up. We see 4 stages in Saul's life. First, you have the anointing we talked about, and then we have the rejection. God is rejecting him, and eventually the land will reject him. And then you have the tension between Saul and David. And in between there, in the story, is also Jonathan. Jonathan is a friend of David. Although much younger than David, most probably. He has there is something going on there. They are friends. Then you have Samuel, who plays a role, a very difficult role. He is the go-between, but he is also the go-between between Saul and the country and the tribes, but he's also the go-between between God and humankind. So he has multiple roles to play. And here we see that God is asking him, is demanding him to anoint someone else as king. That is suicide. If you would do that in that time, and Saul knows, he kills you. Well, he has. I mean, Samuel has to do it, and when you look at it, and we will go into detail in that in a few moments. But you feel the tension. You feel the tension between things that have to be done. God has chosen certain people to do certain things. One of the chosen people is the anointed prophet, namely Samuel. Another one is Saul, is being chosen and rejected, and then we have a new one to be chosen, and so again you have the tension between those two, and yeah, eventually we see that Saul is degenerating, and you find the end of the story in chapter 28 when Saul dies. But the in-between time, that's where you have Saul and David together. First, David goes into the service of Saul as a suitor. It may sound a bit strange, but yeah, it is. Saul has a problem with headaches, and David is playing the harp, and that seemingly goes well with Saul. And then another thing that happens, that is, there's still this problem with the Philistines, and one of those quote Philistines from Gath is Goliath. And I'm sure you heard the story before, and I'm not going into that story so much, but you have to understand where the story fits. It is the time between David being anointed and David becoming king. Saul is the anointed king, and David does not want to kill the king, but the king, Saul, wants to kill David. And so you have the in-between with Jonathan, and Jonathan and David, they have a covenant, and again, King Saul and David also have a covenant, but Saul is not keeping the covenant. But at the same time, David is rising up the ladder, the social ladder. First, he's playing the harp, and seemingly is getting stronger and stronger, and he's called that. I mean, he is named as a warrior even before he goes and fights Goliath. The story of Goliath is special. Goliath seemingly has a brother. Goliath has a brother, and the brother is also, I'm not sure whether they call him Goliath, but what I know is that he is being mentioned. And you find that in the second book of Samuel, in 2 Samuel 21, 2 Samuel 21, in verse 19. Listen to this. And I'm reading. In another battle with the Philistines at Gob, Elhanan, son of Jair, the Bethlehemite, killed the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, or the Gittite, who had a spear with a shaft like a weaver's rod. Verse 20, in still another battle which took place at Gath, there was a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. He also was a descendant from Rapha, when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of Shimei, David's brother, killed him. These four were descendants of Rapha in Gad, and they fell in the hands of David and his men. Again, you have a similar story in First Chronicles. In First Chronicles 20, First Chronicles 20, verse 5. First Chronicles 20, verse 5. War with the Philistines. In the course of time, war broke out with the Philistines at Gezer. At the time of Sibbecai, the Hushitite killed Sippai, one of the descendants of the Rephites, and the Philistines were subjugated. In another battle with the Philistines, Elhanan, son of Jair, killed Lami. Okay, now you have the name of the brother of Goliath the Gittite, who had a spear with a shaft like a weaver's rod. And still in another battle, so there's a whole range of battles and a whole range of similar stories of Goliath-type people that are fighting for the Philistines. Gadites, Philistines, anyway, enemies of Israel, enemies of the land, enemies of the people of Israel. So what do we have? We have a king a person that is going to be a king. We have a king that is an ongoing king. He will be king for 40 years until David takes over. David is fighting his way in and around. One day he has to flee from Jerusalem, or from the court of Saul, and he has to go to another place. But it's difficult to understand. We are talking not about just one person. We are not talking about David running away. We're talking about hundreds of people following David. One time it's mentioned that 600 people were there with him. How do you hide 600 people? Strangely enough, David goes over to the enemy. Isn't that strange? The great king, as we know him, is, let us say it in this way, he's a traitor. He works with and for the enemy. The names are there. The stories are there. First of all, he fights them, and then he works for them. And then he raises finances, and he buys himself in. Can you imagine? Buys himself in to certain places. And those certain places are going with him against King Saul. Strange stories. It's like the complot theories we have today. But they are real. They are happening. Another thing that is mind-boggling is the fact that Saul is promising David one of his daughters, Merab. But he never marries Merab. He marries Michal. He gets children, and Michal is actually helping him to avoid King Saul. So there's David has as people working for him in high places in the court of his enemy, King Saul. His daughter and his son. So what do you think about this? One day they go to, David is going to En Gedi. And when you have been in Israel, you know where En Gedi is. That's the desert. And there he finds a way of cutting a piece of King Saul's mantle. The story goes about a cave and so on. In reality, it was a toilet. So David is hiding in a toilet to cut off, to prove that he had King Saul's life in his hand and he was not misusing that. Eventually, King Saul is being killed at Gilboa, again in a fight with the Philistines. Both King Saul and Jonathan. The people were so grateful to David that they made him king. First the people in Judah, and then later on the people of Israel. So now he is brought together the two main fractions and he's gathered them as a united kingdom. And that's what we were talking about today. That is the united kingdom. We see a lot of material about King David and about in 1st and 2nd Samuel, in 1st King, in 1st Chronicles. But you have to remember that there is more. Let's just look at the names of the brothers of David. He is the youngest one of 8 brothers, so it means there are 7 other brothers, but there are only 6 mentioned. Eliab means my God is father. Abinadab, my father is noble. Shimea is there. That's what it means. Nathaniel, God has given. Radai, to be down. Awesome, strong. And then you have a name which is, we don't know exactly, but maybe that's the name of the last brother. And the reason why he's not mentioned by name is that he's probably deceased at the time David was anointed. So that's what we find in the Bible, teaching us about what names are like. David is not only, I'm not saying the most successful king, but in the minds of the people, even today, in the minds of Jewish people, David is more revered than, for example, Solomon. David has no clean sheet. Absolutely not. We know that he had several concubines, and I'm saying several. I'm not saying just 1 or 2, because he can leave 10 of his concubines in Jerusalem when his son takes over and have sex with the concubines of his father, to prove that he now is the king and he is not the king, and he will be killed. But so David has a terrible life. He loses children, he loses family. His personal life is a disaster. When I say disaster, I mean disaster. Because what David is doing, although he's known as the best king of of the United Kingdom, just what he did with Bathsheba. You know, he sent the husband of Bathsheba to his death. So he's actually killing him. And then he marries Bathsheba. And then the child that's being conceived before this story dies. And then you have another child. And that is eventually Solomon. And David promises that Solomon will be the king. But although, I mean, in line, it's not the first one. So what do we have? We have a whole strange situation that the people that are revered by the Jewish people are actually not that nice people at all. Not that nice people at all. They are doing things which are not supposed to be doing. And they are doing things according to their own understanding, which is not something good. He has a whole range of problems. For example, Tamar was raped by Amnon. That's his half-sister, both from David. Then he kills Amnon because he did something or he does something. That's not right. Absalom fled. What can happen to you in your family? Well, look at the whole range of people that are being named according to David. Look at it. And one is a very special one, because his name is being mentioned many times in the surroundings of David, but it's not the same person. We are talking about Nathan. Nathan is in the list in the genealogy of Jesus in Luke. Nathan is not the prophet Nathan, but is the son Nathan. He eventually becomes the bloodline of David, as part of the bloodline of David in the genealogy of Jesus. So what do we have? We have beautiful stories like the victory over Goliath. We have the unification of the two parts of the kingdom. And we have this beautiful story about Nathan. And then one of the most beautiful things, you can hardly imagine what it would be like for a father and for a religious leader, David was, to prepare a place for worship. You know, David conquered Jerusalem and built a wall around it, built a palace for himself to live in. But he didn't build a house of the Lord, because that was something that he could not do, because he had what the Bible calls blood on his hands. And that would make him unfit to build the most important building in the land of Israel, and it was a temple. Solomon will do so, and we will talk about Solomon in the next class. God bless you.